Continuing our journey from the Cordilleras, we head towards the western coast of northern Luzon. As we do, we also come closer to our present, to a place which symbolizes the first colonization of the Philippines. It was in 1572 that the Spanish conquistador Juan de Salcedo founded Villa Fernandina, which was then located on an island in the Abra River Delta. How Villa Fernandina eventually became Vigan has been subject to some curious speculation. According to local folklore, Vigan got its name from the bigaa plant, which used to grow abundantly along the riverbanks. On the other hand, Chinese chronicles tell of the gold which used to wash down from the mountains to the seacoast, creating a wonderful sight for pre-colonial Chinese sea merchants. Vigan, when written in Chinese characters, means beautiful shore. Whatever the true origins of its name, Vigan throughout its colorful past continued to mirror a strong Chinese influence. Aside from becoming the religious center of the region, Vigan during the 18th and 19th centuries was also the leading trading hub in the Philippine North, ranking third in size, political power, and economic significance after Cebu and Manila. The Mestizo River was central to the development of Vigan's economy. Seagoing ships, which berthed at its delta, carried goods directly from China. As a maritime center, Vigan also participated in the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade by supplying the thick hand-woven cloth used as sails for the galleons. It is therefore not surprising that the architecture and urban layout of Vigan reflect the foreign influences brought about by its former trade connections with China, Mexico, and Spain. And early in the 20th century, America likewise stamped its imprint on the city. Today, Vigan is the only place in the country that has retained most of its colonial architecture. When it was inscribed as a World Heritage Site in 1999, UNESCO cited Vigan as the best preserved example of a planned Spanish colonial town in Asia. The architecture of the typical Vigan house is derived from the traditional Bahay Kubo or Bahay na Nipa. The much larger Bahay na Bato or stone house found in the Mestizo district of Vigan is of 2 stories solidly enclosed with stone walls on the ground level for protection. The second level is constructed completely out of wood. Its roof, covered with terracotta tiles, is steeply pitched and sometimes flares out at the eaves, again reminding us of Chinese influence. The exterior walls of the family quarters on the second level are enclosed with sliding window panels made out of capiz shells. Upon sliding the panels open, the family quarters freely admit the air and sky. I was fortunate to be joined on this trip by Dr. Fernando Cialcita, an anthropologist and fellow conservationist, whose insights on Vigan have always aroused interest.
It is Filipino urban architecture at its very best. It's also town planning at a very productive and very rational level. And also, I like the fact that Vigan combines cultural traditions together. There are innovations in these houses which are very Pinoy, like having, for example, the ventanilla, which is not found in Spain. The whole idea that you don't need too many bedrooms because you can use even the sala as your sleeping room at night. You just lay out the mat. That's very Pinoy.
I've always felt at home in Vigan, not only because I'm an architect, but also because Vigan's architecture relates the story of the Filipino. and of how his constant exposure to foreign influences has endowed him with the ability to adapt foreign ideas and combine them into a style uniquely his own. This trait of adaptability can be seen further in 4 magnificent structures which have been grouped together by UNESCO in its World Heritage List since 1993. The final part of our journey takes us to these sites, the Baroque churches of the Philippines. At the beginning of the Spanish colonial period, the mandate given to the friars by the king was simply to Christianize and educate the natives. But in order to do so, these hardy evangelists also had to provide places of worship. The early Spanish friars, however, were men of God and not architects. In giving instructions for the building of these churches, they could only rely on the memories of similar structures they had seen in Europe and in Latin America, where the Baroque style was then hugely popular. Unintentionally, therefore, these friars and their highly skilled and creative local craftsmen reinterpreted the European Baroque style and thereby established an architecture deceptively Western in appearance but totally Filipino in spirit and context. The charm of each of these 4 churches is in the architectural exuberance, the panache in which Western and Eastern styles combine, and how they clearly demonstrate that we Filipinos did not simply accept Christianity at face value. We added our own touches. Ricky Jose, one of the country's foremost authorities on colonial church architecture, shared some of his observations about the unique design and structure of these churches.
What would make them unique is their response to the earthquakes and to the natural conditions in the country. And I think the 4 are some of the best examples of how Filipinos and builders in this country resolved all these problems.
The builder's primary consideration in protecting these churches from earthquakes can best be seen in Pawai's San Agustin Church. 14 S-shaped buttresses rise almost to the roofline, each one topped by a triumphant pyramidal finial. It is the most massive buttressing in any Philippine church. It is primarily for this reason that Pawai Church has been cited as the best example of a style that has come to be known as earthquake Baroque. To further protect the church from intense seismic activity, the coral stone bell tower was built some distance away, a common design feature among Philippine colonial churches. The facade of Pawai Church, however, varies from the standard design. Heavier coral stone blocks occupy the upper level and finials, while in the lower portion, smaller stones were used as building material. 100 kilometers to the south lies the town of Santa Maria, where the second of our World Heritage churches is located. Unlike the traditional Spanish urban town plan that situates the church in the central plaza, the church of Nuestra Señora de la Asunción is situated atop a hill and fortified by a stone wall. Resembling a citadel and without any adjacent structures, the church is the only example of such magnificent siting in the Philippines. A pair of exaggerated cylindrical columns frames its plain facade. Similar to the one in Pawai, the bell tower is completely detached from the main church structure. Massive and squat, it is constructed of stacked octagonal shapes of decreasing diameter and crowned by a small dome, thus evoking a Chinese pagoda. Built of brick, the church has thick lateral walls with no ornamentation except for the delicately carved side entrances. These are bolstered regularly by huge quadrangular buttresses, which serve as the usual protection against earthquakes. Also standing on its town's highest elevation is the Church of Santo Tomas de Villanueva. It is considered as a classic example of a church style known as Fortress Baroque. Miagao's massive pair of bell towers were on a permanent lookout for Muslim invaders. The squatness of the church and angled buttresses further strengthened its fortress image. The church's facade is a masterpiece. Filipino stone carvers filled its entire surface with tassels, vines, tendrils, swags, and festoons in wild abandon. The facade's central element is St. Christopher, clad like a Filipino with rolled-up trousers. Carrying the Christ child on his back, he holds on to a lush coconut tree for support. Beside him are guava and papaya trees. Clearly derivative of the Baroque style but totally folk in execution, Santo Tomas de Villanueva sums up the Filipino transfiguration of Western decorative elements. Back in Manila, I visit the oldest stone church in the country and the only one in Intramuros to have survived the ravages of World War II. Originally built of bamboo and nipa, San Agustin Church was eventually constructed using stone blocks in 1587 after repeated destruction by fire and earthquake. 300 years later, its left bell tower cracked during another earthquake and was permanently demolished for safety reasons. Still, the structural design of the church remains extraordinarily sound. It is said that the structure is supported by a raft-type foundation that permits the entire church to sway during earthquakes. Thick walls in between the small chapels lining each side of the nave act as buttresses. They were integrated into the church's interior because of the limited space within the walled city. All built of stone, a barrel vault, dome, and arch vestibule support the choir loft. No other construction of this type can be seen in the Philippines. The interior of San Agustin Church is superb. The existing trompe-l'œil painting, done in the late 19th century, was the influence for the interior paintings of many Philippine churches. Within the church and its adjoining monastery, you can find a priceless collection of religious art.
Our church heritage is an important means for understanding the faith. It's like the new evangelization. So if we are able to interpret all these old churches, the statuary, to get the meanings out of this, we understand them better, and then we also understand our faith better.